Hey there. So in this video, we are going to take a look at the ecology to environmental factors that affect living things notes. So this is going to be packet page 152 from our handout. So let's define a few terms again. So two things that can affect organisms. First are abiotic factors. Remember, these are the non-living factors in the environment. So a couple of examples, again, of abiotic factors. You have temperature, water, wind, and sunlight. All of these things can affect living things. When we think about temperature, we might also think about the different climates around the world. If you live in a rainforest, you're used to one type of temperature and amount of water and sunlight. If you live up in the tundra, up near up in Alaska or near the North Pole, you are used to different temperatures and water and sunlight. So abiotic factors, the non-living factors in the ecosystem. And then, of course, we have the biotic factors. Those are the actual living things in the environment. And remember, biotic factors can be anything like predators. So the lynx that we were talking about in our previous video, humans, which we could maybe lump into that predator section, grass, other animals like, we've got this mallard right here. I'm not sure if this is a catfish or what. We've got a red-shouldered bird here. I can't remember the actual name for it. A heron, and then of course trees, grass, lily pads, all sorts of biotic factors here. So sometimes living things don't have enough resources in their environment, and so when those resources are in short supply, we call them limiting factors. So a limiting factor can be abiotic or biotic that limits how many organisms of a certain species can survive in a single environment. An example of an abiotic limiting factor could be water. So if we think about a desert, water is definitely going to be a limiting factor on how many species or how many organisms of a species can survive. A biotic limiting factor could be a predator. So predators can certainly limit, the number of prey species that can survive in an area. So here we have, again, the example I gave, not necessarily a desert. This is probably more like a savanna. We've got this small watering hole that is slowly drying up. Due to these limiting factors, each ecosystem has what's called a carrying capacity. That is the maximum number of organisms that could possibly survive in that ecosystem. So the maximum number of prey and predator species. So carrying capacity, the maximum number of organisms that could possibly survive in a specific environment. And then a bunch of people. So let's take a look at the amount of resources. So if you have unlimited resources, plenty of water, plenty of food, shelter, mates, then your population will keep growing. So generation after generation, you have enough food and water. You're not worried at all. This type of growth, this unlimited growth, is known as exponential growth. So in your notes, you have two empty boxes. We're going to start on the box on the left where it's labeled unlimited growth. Underneath that, in the parentheses, we are going to write exponential growth because that's what we call unlimited growth. Unlimited growth we have drawn out in a graph here. So that's what we're going to put in that first box. So you're going to draw your y and x axis. We're going to label the x axis as time. So the x axis is time, and your y axis is the population size. So we can see that as time is moving, from one generation to the next, not necessarily 1 minute, but probably one generation, we have this unlimited or exponential growth. So the population size is increasing exponentially, and there is no end in sight. So exponential growth is sometimes referred to as a J curve. So we're going to add the word J curve just above the box, just like I've done here. So in the parentheses underneath unlimited growth, we wrote exponential growth. And then just above the box where we drew our graph, we're going to label this as a J curve. Now this is if there are unlimited resources. And I bet you're probably thinking to yourself, but there aren't unlimited resources. There is a finite supply of food and water and shelter. And that's absolutely correct. So there is a limited amount of resources. We know that populations cannot keep growing exponentially forever. Eventually, one or multiple resources will start to run out. This is called logistic growth. Now, in your notes, over on the right-hand side, you have it labeled limited growth, right? Because there's limited amount of supplies. And I accidentally left out the line underneath it for you to write logistic growth. So I apologize for that error. So underneath where it says limited growth on the right-hand side, we're going to add logistic growth. And of course, logistic growth looks like an S curve. So in our graph, again, we have our y-axis as our population size. The x-axis is still time, probably in generations. And we can see here that at the beginning, right, we're growing steady, right, and we're increasing. Our population size is increasing. But at a certain point in time, we start to level off. Right? And so our graph kind of looks like a very stretched out letter S. What's happened is we have reached our carrying capacity. Remember, we defined carrying capacity as the maximum number of organisms that could survive in a given environment. So we've maybe run out of food, right? We've grazed all of the grass and it's gone. The watering hole dried up, anything like that. So this population for this environment has reached its carrying capacity. So it is undergoing limited or logistic growth. So again, just another example of the graph where, again, we see that carrying capacity has been reached. And this is also known as an S curve. Carrying capacity. A couple more vocab terms for us, again, just to make sure. Ecosystem, we've defined as all of an organism's surroundings. So your biotic and abiotic. So the biotic and abiotic factors in this ecosystem, right? We've got fish and coral and crabs, and there's a sea star. I see a polar bear, I think, in the background. And then, of course, my abiotic factors, temperature, water, sunlight. And there's a boat. That's definitely abiotic. And then, of course, the habitat, that is where the organism actually lives. So are we in a rainforest? Are we in a grassland? Are we in a desert? So, right, lions out on the savanna. So again, if we think about the biotic and abiotic factors where we live in our ecosystem or our habitat, I would include my dog, and my cat, and the grass, and the trees, and the deer. The abiotic factors in my ecosystem, I could talk about the water from the well, or the wind, the amount of sunlight we get. And that is it for these notes on environmental factors that can affect living things. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. Thanks.